we're old enough to have probably typed our papers when we were in junior high and high school.
On a typewriter.
On a typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on a typewriter.
No, we had definitely moved on to the computers by the time I got there.
So that's a deep question.
That is very deep. I did not know that here on
we
this
were going to go
episode
to
of
this.
Bugle Notes.
I
did not know that.
Will AI be able to create a symphony better than our best composers?
Right.
Beethoven, Bach, and
Right.
Mozart, and all of them. Probably not. Can it create one better than I can create? 100, I'll say 1,000%. Yes.
All right, get on with it. Welcome, everybody, to our latest episode of Bugle Notes. I'm Stephen Weitzel, joined by my colleague Joe Perdue, and special guest Joe's going to introduce here in just a minute. But our discussion today is about AI, artificial intelligence, and obviously there's been plenty in the news about AI over the last year and a half, 2 years, but it's still such a novel concept that most of us are just trying to figure out exactly what it is, what it isn't, but how it's being incorporated into our lives and how we're going to use it in our daily lives. And the benefits of it, maybe some of the things that we should be concerned about as a society. So let's jump into it.
As we discussed the topic, we could think of no one better than my West Point classmate Warren Hearnes to join us, and he was gracious enough to do so. As a matter of introduction, Warren is founder of Optimal AI, a firm operating at the intersection of optimization, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. He's also CEO of Sportlytics, delivering actionable insights for sports professionals. An interesting gig that we can discuss a little more about. Before that, and I'll say, as I mentioned briefly, a very small portion of Warren's bio. He's accomplished quite a lot, so I'm on the tip of the iceberg here, just mentioning a few parts of all he's accomplished in his career. But he was former chief data scientist at Best Buy. He's a former chief analytics officer at Cardlytics. Warren's been local to Atlanta, he's a longtime friend, and has been in the area post-Army, I think. He has a master's from Georgia Tech and his PhD from Georgia Tech.
That's what we should really focus on. And I know we talked about how the two of you came to know each other at West Point, but we know that Georgia Tech was the real launching pad for you, Warren, and how that's near and dear to our hearts here at Reveille.
And so the Georgia Tech was near and dear to me. I got my basic leadership and discipline and a lot of the things from West Point. So wouldn't be where I am without both West Point and Georgia Tech.
Well, we appreciate your service.
Thank you. It was a privilege.
So no one better in our minds than Warren Hearnes to help us understand, help us define some of these terms we're hearing and reading about related to artificial intelligence, help us understand a bit more about what the future holds, because we are constantly told these days, feels to me like we're constantly told that we're all underestimating what a big deal artificial intelligence is. And I think to myself, all right, I'll take them at their word that it's going to be a big deal, but I really don't have a very clear understanding of what that means to me day to day. And then secondly, I felt like we ought to talk a little about, given our audience of clients, what it means for investing and what's coming around the corner that we might not really know about. Those are my initial thoughts.
So I'd say, Warren, why don't you just kind of set the table for us and let us know, I mean, how do you define AI? What is it? And then what are maybe some of the misconceptions that people think it is that it's not?
Sure. So that's a great question. I've been in this field for I guess, going on 35 or more years, maybe 40 if you count some of the things that I did in undergrad. So I've always been interested in using math and data to make better decisions. And back in the, actually in the introduction, you talked about it being novel. Well, AI has been around since the 1950s, 1960s. So one of the first really important papers that came from Marvin Minsky in 1961 on steps towards artificial intelligence, and he laid out 4 or 5 things that we're still working on today. So AI has gone through several hype cycles, winters, and we're in a great, and I say hype cycle not in a bad way. I mean, we are riding a really good wave right now.
It's like an industrial revolution almost type thing.
You know, you could make the argument that we're still in the steam engine phase of where we're at in AI
certainly
right
in a
now.
cycle of greater awareness.
Exactly. So to a lot of people, it does feel novel. So I would say AI is a superset of what we were calling machine learning back in the 80s and 90s. Machine learning is really pattern recognition. You can give it a lot of data. It can fit some models to it. It can classify things. It can predict things. It can do some pretty cool things. My area of PhD research was in reinforcement learning. So we taught computers to learn how to control a process by giving it a +1 for positive reinforcement and a -1 for negative reinforcement, and it eventually learned like you would teach a child or an animal. Well, AI, in my view, is a superset of that. It deals with more of the human aspects, not really the fast computation, but the human aspects of understanding text, understanding speech, understanding images, and hopefully doing some reasoning and thinking and acting in a way that a human would. So and where we've gotten with some of the large language models in the past couple of years is that step change of where it does seem to understand what we're asking it to do. It does seem to understand videos and audio and images and can explain what's going on in them. And so that's why we're at a really interesting time for AI.
Although it's still a little bumpy, right, in terms of the machine being able to understand what's happening in an image or a video, or trying to replicate an image of some kind. I saw something recently where somebody had asked one of the AI tools, and I don't know if it was Grok or ChatGPT or whichever, but to put a map of the financial centers of the United States. And so it picked what would have been the recognizable cities: New York, San Francisco, Chicago, Miami, Houston, things like that. But where it drew a map of the United States, where it placed those cities was actually nowhere near where those cities actually are. And so maybe that's where there's still some advancement yet to be done, right?
So I think we can get into it in a little bit. That's where, if you rely on one particular model, which in this case sounds like image generation, then it's really just assembling what it's seen in the past and trying to come up with something that looks kind of like that. And that's why it's really hard to write text, have it generate text inside an image. But what we see now that's more successful is these large language models understanding what you're wanting, and then when it's something that is more structured or concrete, then it calls out to a tool. So I would imagine that somebody could pretty easily take something like that and say, I've identified what the large language model has identified what the cities are. Let me call out to a tool to get the latitude and longitude of those cities, maybe the weather data and things like that, and then let me create an image that isn't just an artist representation of this, but is something that's a little bit
it's
more
accurate.
But it's more accurate. And that's where you're seeing a lot of the AI agents and things like that we're hearing about now, They are basically tools. A model context protocol is a tool that you can put in front of any structured data, and the large language model acts as an intermediary, calls out to that and says, oh, this person wants to know the weather in Atlanta. Let me call weather.com's API, get that weather, and I'll get some information, and then I'm gonna talk to that person like it's a real person giving the answer, but it's actual accurate information.
Sure. So can we define what is a large language model? What is that?
Yeah. So there's probably a very specific definition that, but it's typically when the number of parameters. So these models are learned through deep learning. So it's a neural network, and neural networks have these deep learning networks have a large number of layers and neurons and everything that's in it. So each one of those has basically a coefficient or a parameter. And as the number of parameters got bigger, they went from some of the earlier ones from Meta, like Llama 3 might have been an 8 billion parameter model. I think GPT 3.5 was maybe I don't know if it was 175 billion, but as they're getting bigger and bigger. So I would say anything that's probably over 15, 20, 30 billion parameters is a large language model.
When you're talking about parameters, is that just like a piece of information that's on the internet that's queryable on the internet?
What it means is that the way neural networks map and reduce error from the input to the output. So you give it an input and you expect an output, and it changes the weights of all of these neurons are connected, and then they're basically just some type of nonlinear function approximation, and the more neurons you have, the more interesting functions you can approximate. So if you have something that has a billion parameters and weights in there, then it can do some very interesting things. But if you're giving it 100 billion documents, it probably can't do as well as an 10 billion parameter or 100 billion parameter. Now, it takes a long time to train these things. That's where it gets into the hardware and the energy and things like that. So as these models get bigger and bigger, you start to hear how much it costs, how many documents they need for input, how much it costs, how much energy, how much time it takes to create these models and update them, and you'll probably start seeing them take longer and longer to go from 03 from OpenAI to 04, and maybe I've heard that we're basically out of all the documents, so now the rest of it's going to be synthetic data.
So would we say that is it really just kind of an enhanced search tool? Is it an enhanced Google algorithm? Is that the way that it's designed? What's the intent behind it?
So I think most people are using it
Okay.
as just an enhanced Google search. Because one of the things that a large language model can do is take a lot of information and summarize it. So when you're using the generative AI on Google, it's doing what you used to do, which is you would do a Google search, and it would give you the front page of links, and you would look at 2 or 3 or 4, and you would synthesize and summarize that information, and then so now the generative AI is going in, and that's just one aspect that it can do. So it's not just enhanced search. It's all I recommend, and I do teach with some others to Department of Defense civilians some beginning AI, and one of the things that's really interesting to them is for them to get over just asking it a question and then getting an answer back. Treat the AI as an expert, as your friend who's an expert in something, and the more clear you get with the prompt, you could say something like to the AI, you are an expert financial advisor with 20 years of experience in these types of areas. And then you could ask it a couple of different questions. And the more you can go out there and look at advanced prompting. But then the key is not to just take that answer. The key is to have a conversation with it and say, well, that's interesting. I didn't know anything about this type of investing. Can you tell me more about that? And it becomes, so it's less search and more of a way for you to have access to all of the documents and all of the things that it has seen in its training.
So you're having a conversation with a super intelligent something.
Yes, and I will put this caveat in there. The hallucinations have come down quite a bit, but don't trust that everything coming out of the AI is 100% true. But I'll also say, if you treat it like a person, if you talk to an expert, you aren't always going to believe that expert. Experts have biases. Human experts have biases,
right.
And so if you treat AI as something that's like, hey, at this stage, I'm getting some assistance. I'm learning about things faster, and I will also say there's a consensus now that AI is giving us answers so quickly that that really what is becoming the art now is asking the right set of questions.
Yeah.
So it used to be really hard to get an answer to something, and that was the barrier. And now, then Google and the internet gave you more, and now this is giving you answers so fast that we're getting back to what is a smart question to ask? What is the next follow-up? What do we do?
Yeah. One thing I remember, there was a podcast that Elon Musk did with Joe Rogan a few years ago, and he talked about, and this was before AI was really on the scene, where there was a lot of awareness about it. But Elon was talking about how we're headed to this environment where we're going to be droids, right? Mm-hmm. Where in this concept of anything that we want to do, right? If I want to work on the engine of my car, well, I don't have a skill set to be able to do that, right? Maybe much to my grandfather's chagrin, I don't have the skill set to do that. Limited capacity. But I could search any of those things online and find out how to, take an engine apart or whatever it is. And so the knowledge is out there, but the ability to transfer it into my mind and out through my hands is where the delay is.
Sure.
Right? That's where there's a latency, right? And that maybe the AI speeds it up.
Yeah, so that's a good point of understanding for me the evolution, because right now that's several YouTube searches. Mm-hmm. All right, I got to do this thing to the engine. I'm going to find some guy with a video. That's the easiest way to do it that I know. Mm-hmm. Now, AI is going to make that less iterative. If I'm just going to talk to AI about how I'm doing this, maybe, and therefore get quicker, better results at some point.
I could. So AI can parse out those videos and understand. So it has the transcript of the YouTube videos. It knows what's in those. It could help you search for the right parts better. I will say that on ChatGPT, if you're a pro subscriber, if you're a subscriber, a paid subscriber, you can create custom GPTs. And custom GPTs are really just, you can put some documents up there. Yeah. You can also ask it to do certain things in a certain way. And so every time you go to that, you don't have to keep telling it, oh, you are this, this, and this. I want you to answer it like this. So I have an RV. I created a custom GPT that has my owner's manual, all the troubleshooting documents, the location of every tool in my RV, and now instead of me thumbing through the owner's manual, I can say, oh, I'm having a problem with my tankless water heater. What should I do? And it's taking all of the information that I already gave it, but it also
Can still
I also
pull out.
told it that it's an expert RV mechanic, and to tell me what it thinks I can do DIY versus what it thinks I should take it to a professional mechanic, and it's just walking me through those things.
And so how does it know, like, how can it differentiate between this is a task that I think that Warren is capable of versus a task that Warren is not capable of?
So I think that's either through the conversation that you're having with it at that moment, or you could build that into what's called the system prompt. Because what you are seeing when you talk to ChatGPT, that's the user prompt. That's what you are saying. There is behind the scenes sometimes a 100-word or 1,000-word or 5,000-word system prompt that the person that has created, or the company that has created that model, has said, these are the things you can and can't do. You can't say profanity. You can't do all these things. So if in my case, I could make that in the system prompt that says, Warren has comfort doing things with drills, screwdrivers, but he doesn't want to do anything with electricity. And then it can know that. But I could either put that into the system prompt,
yep,
or bring it out into
So
the conversation. So it gets back into the conversation.
As advanced as AI is becoming and the things that it's learning, do the machines still only know what we tell them what they know?
There's debate about that, but I would say yes. I think they're doing a very good job of take the current large language model process through what we call transformers is doing an excellent job that we are exploiting, which is it's looking at all the training data, it's figuring out what your question relates to in all of its training data, and then it's coming out with an answer. There are reasoning models out there that have had some success that are basically just those models, but then it says things like "show me your work" or "do this step by step," and that reasoning seems to have it do better on certain math problems and certain coding problems and certain thinking problems. But whether or not it is actually reasoning, I think just last week or 2 weeks ago there was a paper by Apple that says no, they are not reasoning at all. But what they're doing is some really cool stuff, and it's really valuable. So in machine learning, there's something called the explore versus exploit trade-off. You're trying to figure out when you should explore new things versus when you should say, oh, I've got something pretty good here, I'm going to exploit that. And I think we're in an area of AI with these large language models of, while others are exploring new possible ways of doing AI and learning things, let's exploit what this is doing right now, because it can do some amazing things for search, summarization, translation, coding, agentic AI, in terms of it can do some of the tasks that we don't really want to do.
Yeah, so I want to hit in on that briefly because one of our research partners put out a note a few weeks ago where he was talking about that the advancements that have been made in AI now have the prospect of taking away a lot of service-related jobs. And whether it's something as basic as in the legal field, that AI can write contracts, it can check for errors, it writes most of the prospectus for new investments these days, that there is the high likelihood that there are some more menial tasks in our society that can be replaced with AI, and that there are service-related jobs that we never thought necessarily would go away. It may not be work that everybody necessarily wants to do, but now that could be a headwind for where we're going as an economy, that you could have a lot of workers that get displaced by that if they don't have a skill set of a certain level. Do you think that's correct?
Well, I think to a degree that's correct. There will be jobs that where AI can do this more efficiently, but I also think that there are a lot of things that we're just not doing, and I'm going to give an example here of something that Joe and I talked about a little bit earlier, is that there are many tasks, either personal or professional, that we don't do because they just the value of them is good, but it's not worth the amount of time that it's going to take me, which is opportunity cost for me to do something else. So as I experiment with different types of AI, one of the things I did recently was, personally, I love to scan every bill, every medical document, everything into my scanner so that it's in the cloud and it's on my computer and I can get to it.
You can trash the hard copy.
I can trash the hard copy and keep it, and so then I can just, if I need a document, I just go into that directory and I look for something that says medical date Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield Dental Crown Warren.pdf. But you know what? It takes, when I scan it, my scanner just puts in year, month, date, hour, minute, second.pdf.
Yep.
And in my mind, I'm like, I'm gonna go back in and I'm gonna change those things. But
you never do.
I don't.
Yep.
So a couple of months ago, I had over 560 scans that I needed to rename, and I was like, this is something that I'm not ever gonna do. I'm not ever gonna just sit there and click on something, take 10 seconds, look at it, and rename it. Well, guess what? A large language model is basically understanding that text. So what I did is I'm a decent programmer, but I'm not a great programmer. So I asked AI to help me write some Python code that would look for a file with that type of file name, then use OCR to pull out the text in that document.
OCR meaning?
Optical character recognition, which has been around for, when you scan something and it turns it into text, that's been around for probably since the 80s or 90s. And sometimes PDF already has the text in there. So then it just pulls the text out. And then it looks like a jumble of text, but it has important things in there like Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield. It has my name, it has the date, it has cost, all these other types of things. And then I iterated through probably about 10 or 15 different prompts that were for AI, that were about a paragraph long, that gave it examples of what I like to rename my files. It's like, if it's medical, then it's the medical. If it has a date, then put that in year, month, date format. If it has two dates, use the second date. So like an investment, it goes from January 1st to December 31st, I want that second date. So I iterated through a couple of test cases, and then the output was something that could rename my files. So I tested it out. It worked probably 90% accuracy. That's good enough for me. And now I just have that every 5 minutes look to see if there's any scans in my directory, and it renames them for me. So that's a long way of saying that I think there are a lot of things that bring value to us as people or a society that we're just not doing right now.
Sure.
So can we get AI to do some of that for us, which then frees us up to do the more interesting things? Or if you don't have the other skills, then maybe the AI is is pushing some people out. But I think for most people, it's, hey, I now have so much. I only had 2 hours to figure out whether I should do an investment. Before, I needed to reduce some uncertainty, so I used to Google and figure out some things and read some SEC filings. Now, AI can give me 10 times or 100 times as much information in that 2 hours. That's much more valuable, and I'm making a better decision.
So it's an effective tool that we can leverage to make us more efficient, to help us make higher quality decisions.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I think the higher quality decisions.
But there's certainly going to be.
There will be impact. There will be impact. I'm not going to deny that, but I'm also. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's not that we're going to have AI take over everything, because it does still give wrong answers,
right.
and it can, and so we still need humans in the loop to do certain things. But maybe we don't need as much middle management.
Right.
You know, it could impact some entry-level jobs, but it also maybe
White
you don't.
collar
Yeah. So
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of, and that's been a part of our economy where, I mean, we don't manufacture a whole lot domestically anymore, very service-oriented, and that if there are a number of white-collar jobs that have been fairly insulated, that now if there's AI that's able to replace a lot of that, and you still obviously are going to have some people there, but with the AI tools, they could do the work of 3 people, 4 people, right? That all of a sudden that's something that maybe a lot of people are not planning for.
Could be. I think that I want to reiterate that even if the AI is helping you, that person do the work of 3 or 4 people. When I was an executive, I would have a portfolio of projects that had a certain value and a certain number of resources, and I couldn't complete every project because I didn't have enough resources. Just because something can help you do something 3 times faster doesn't immediately mean I need one third as many people. It could mean that I can now go down my entire list of projects. So I think initially we might see some of that, but I think it's going to enhance the productivity and make things better overall.
So, you know, ultimately I want to come back and have a discussion about maybe how this relates to what we saw with the internet, because obviously the advent of the internet made us much more efficient. It's changed our lives in ways that we didn't know exactly what it was going to be in the early 90s to what it is today. But this idea, Warren, that you're talking about with the efficiency gains that are available, and I want to relate this to some of the companies that are producing some of the chips. So a company like an NVIDIA or an AMD or an Intel or a Taiwan Semi or whomever it is, that, you know, NVIDIA has kind of been dominant, I guess, and maybe they were the first maybe into this space, and they have the preeminent chip that maybe moves faster, stronger, whatever it is. But a discussion I was having with another friend of mine who's in the AI field is that a lot of these other companies out there that still make really good chips, they may not be quite as advanced as NVIDIA, and companies are now feeling the pressure to invest in AI, and they're going to want to see some return on their investment. But if they go out and they spend $250,000 on a individual NVIDIA chip, that's going to be them going from, you know, speed of 0 to the speed of sound, versus they could have invested, you know, in a chip that wasn't nearly as expensive. Maybe it's not quite as advanced as that NVIDIA chip, but the things that it's going to do, even if they're moving at 30 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour, it's still going to be a huge leap from where they already are. Can you speak to that?
Yeah. So I think the the car analogy is very good, because NVIDIA does have an instruction set called CUDA, which does things so much faster than these other chips, especially for the training. At least for right now, they have some dominance. Training isn't the only thing that we use AI for. So training is what creates the models, but inference is what is used when you or I go to, when we go and we put a question into the model, or we ask it to do something. That's not training, that's inference. And so I think training takes a lot more power and a lot more in terms of electrical power and a lot more computing power. But inference itself, there's orders of magnitude more inference going on when we use AI, because it could be billions of people asking questions versus a few companies creating these models. And the question would be, how fast do you need that answer?
Yeah.
Because I can run some smaller large language models locally, which I did for my the example I said earlier, because I didn't want my medical information going out to ChatGPT. I wanted to stay local. And so you watch when that happens there. It's not as fast as when you do it on ChatGPT. It comes out and it's usually about 2 or 3 words per second. It's like so, but I don't need it to be faster, and I don't need, for me, privacy was
paramount, right?
Was more important than doing it fast, because I could just have that thing spit out those 500 in a matter of a couple hours, and then I don't scan documents all that often. So to your point, there is something about what do we need right now. Everybody's going out and trying to buy these chips as fast as possible, and I'm sure that there's companies trying to create chips that can do things as fast or with lower power. So there's a whole lot of massive growth in that area. Whether it's sustainable, we will see. But the amount of power that it takes for an NVIDIA, like my graphics card in my computer at home, which runs some AI, but it also plays some nice video games, takes about 400 watts of power. Our human brain, they say, uses about 20 watts of power. That we are exploiting something right now with the way these large language models work, and that could be disrupted by a new algorithm or a new chip that could render some of what we're doing right now. They could make it look like what we think of as vacuum tubes and things like that.
Yeah.
The transistor, this vacuum tube to the transistor. People might be thinking, what we're doing right now is like, why would you have ever tried it that way? Well, this is the only way we knew how to do it right now.
Yeah, it's kind of you see the story, the evolution of the smartphones, right? And how you had the Palm Pilot, and then the BlackBerry, and the BlackBerry was the cat's meow, and then here comes the iPhone, right? And all of a sudden the BlackBerry is
Right.
ancient history.
And that's the interesting part. Your question allows us to make the case for NVIDIA losing leadership, how that could play out in the future. And so, Warren, help us understand a little about looking around the corners. We'd all be much better investors if we could see the future. I think it was Sunday or Monday, I saw an interview with Kathy Wood, founder of ARK Invest, a technology investor. And her job is in the technology sector, trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future, how things are going to play out. And she was saying that as they calculated it, Uber could move us for between $2 and $4 per mile. That's their cost to do so. And they expected Elon's robo-taxi to be able to do this at about 25 cents per mile. And with this lowering of costs that they see coming, a lot more people are going to take advantage of that. Therefore, the roads are going to be clogged. So she's researching electric vehicle takeoff and landing now, because we're going to go to the sky because the roads are going to be too crowded in this conjecture. So it got me thinking that well, you know what? The next day in the Wall Street Journal, actually, this must have been Monday or Tuesday, was an article on an airplane that used a technology called blown lift.
Was it Archer Aviation?
I don't remember.
They do like the little vertical takeoff stuff, the electric stuff, or
no? I've seen that. I saw that on 60 Minutes. But this one's not a vertical, but it's a short runway. So basically, it's using propellers across the wings to blow air to create additional lift, so that it can have a short takeoff and landing. And it's, in my mind, very similar to the vertical takeoff and landing idea. But as at least a peripheral AI involved example there, it made me think that's I'm just trying to figure out how AI is more than enhanced search.
So you know, I don't know anything about the things that Kathy Wood was talking about there, but this would be let's just draw it back to AI from the way you use it. So this would be a very interesting conversation for you to have with your chosen either ChatGPT, the 4.0, or the deep research versions, or the reasoning versions like O3, or if you like Claude or something. It would be a very interesting thing for you to throw this out there and then say, oh, well, if Uber can do it for $2 and we can drop that into, drop 80 to 90% off of that, will that make more, what are your thoughts about that making the roads more congested? Maybe it will, maybe it won't, because you can start asking it other things of like, help me poke holes in this. Could it be, and I'm just riffing on this, could it be that if these robo-taxis are so convenient and cheap, then couldn't rideshare be much more accessible? So what if everyone could share a ride with someone else to where they're going? Well, that theoretically drops the traffic in half.
Right. How's the math work on that with more bodies in the vehicle?
So you can start asking AI to help you brainstorm and poke holes and be the devil's advocate. These are all the ways that I use AI. I'm like, I have certain biases in the way that I perceive things, and I can ask AI to help me see that in a different way.
Be aware. Regardless of whether it's in technology or other fields, energy, I've heard you mention. What else is coming that we might not expect in terms of investors who are going to see a changed world, but we don't really know how?
Yeah, I wish I knew what we were going to see that we didn't expect. Because and I'm going to caveat this with, I gave a talk one time about 6 months before ChatGPT came out, and we'd heard rumblings about this new version of, it was GPT 3.5, because so clearly there was a 1, 2, and a 3 that weren't all that amazing. And one of the people asked me, said, do you think it's going to be able to do coding? And I was like, no, it can't do coding. Now, flash forward to where we're at right now, and I used AI. I wrote 8,000 lines of code over the weekend on an app using AI-assisted coding. So, I don't always see what's coming, because there's some really smart researchers out there that are doing some cool things. But
question on that though, is your ability to use AI to write 8,000 lines of code, is that predicated on the fact that you have knowledge going into it, right? It's not like somebody isn't coming in with no knowledge to be able to do that.
You could come in with no knowledge and still get some things done, but this really is. I have an analogy of AI in its form right now. For most people, is like a very knowledgeable and possibly overconfident intern. You've got You've got to give it clear direction of what you want, and it will come back to you with some answers because it has access to a lot of information, but not a lot of experience and wisdom. And the experience and wisdom is what you, as the boss or the editor or someone, has to look at this and say, no,
does that make sense?
Does that make sense? I don't think
that's
that makes
so
sense.
good. I love that.
So I think that's.
Right, but I want to stay on my topic of predicting the future for another minute. How are we going to power all this compute? And a lot of it's been Elon talking about the sun, and a lot of it's been nuclear.
So I do think that I've read where there needs to be hundreds of billions of dollars worth of energy improvements to handle this, because we are right now thinking that it is going to take a lot of actual electrical power to do these things. We already mentioned that if the brain can do so much of this on much less power, then there is something fundamentally wrong. I shouldn't say wrong. It's fundamentally different that how we have evolved.
Sure.
So there might be something. So right now, I think immediately you're going to have to exploit what we already have, which is the NVIDIA chips, the potential for data centers,
the big data centers.
The big data centers. You'll look for those big data centers need data coming in. They'll need energy coming in, and therefore, the ones that are able to provide those services and that construction, that's important. But keep in mind that there could be something 2 years down the road where a group of researchers says, hey, we have something that's totally different than this.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I say this a lot, so I'm not sure I've said it already, but the way that we train large language models right now, which is give them every document that ever existed and train them for months and months for our children, we give them maybe up until through 6th grade or something like that. Maybe they've read 100 books or 200 books. They've had 100,000 conversations, and they've been taught curated examples, and they are very, very good.
Yeah, so maybe we could do that with the machines. Maybe we don't have to overload them, right?
So is there something out there? If the brain can do all of this with a lot less power, and we can train and teach our children with a lot less information, there's a fundamental model that I don't think we know yet.
So I would say, and kind of piggybacking on what Joe's question was, that the environment that we're in right now calls for an incredible amount of power to be able to bring this to fruition the way that we're using it right now. And the electric grid is not in a condition to be able to do that. We're going to need more power plants, whether it's nuclear energy, if it's natural gas, God forbid if it's coal or hydro, whatever it is. But we're woefully underpowered to be able to get all of these data centers up and running the way that we would need. And so maybe the energy space broadly could be a great benefactor from all of this. Kind of the picks and shovels. It isn't it isn't a technology company, but if we don't have fossil fuels coming out of the ground, if we don't have natural gas coming out of the ground to turn these turbines for these utility companies, then these data centers aren't working the way that we need them to, right? So I think that's definitely an extension of this AI movement, is the energy that's necessary to move it forward. But
I think the timeline, many think that, my assumption is that many people think that nuclear is inevitable. It's a long timeline to get a reactor online.
Well, it is here domestically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
and
It
then,
is-
and
it
the
is
same
here
thing.
domestically.
Elon acts as if we're inevitably going to be using the sun to power everything when we learn how to do it more efficiently.
Well, the one thing I'll say on this, I think that too, maybe we don't need to be naive as Americans and think that there aren't other options for where some of this data is actually housed. I think it was Sam Altman, OpenAI, was on a trip. He went over to France and was having a meeting with their leaders because they have a lot more nuclear facilities than we do, and maybe they have the capacity to be able to power the new builds. And so maybe some of this goes beyond our shores here simply because they have the infrastructure maybe that will support it more so than we do. So I want to move on to this idea of, and maybe there is no parallel, but can we compare what's going on in AI? Can we compare it at all to what we experience with the internet?
I think so. I think this is something that we had that with the internet. We've also had the analogy that computers and word processors made things better. The internet gave us more information faster, connected us. You can argue whether or not some of that connectedness is better or worse, but we do have more information. So if we're taking a high level view of whether or not our life is a sequence of decisions, and whether or not we are better off if we have more information for a decision than less information, I think the internet greatly improved that. I think AI is something similar in the sense that if it took us, if we did a Google search, found 5 PDFs, and it took us an hour to read all of those, and it turns out one of those was interesting but the other 4 weren't, and so we only had an hour to do something, then we looked at 5 documents and found one. If AI can do that in 10 seconds, then we are going to have much more information at our fingertips to make better decisions. And you think about, like, when we're old enough to have probably typed our papers when we were in junior high and high school.
On a typewriter.
On a typewriter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on a typewriter.
No, we had definitely moved on to the computers by the time I got there.
Yeah. So you think about this, and this is something that those of us that are of that age can understand. If you had to type a 10-page paper on a typewriter, and then you looked back at page 2 and saw that there was something you could have said better, or a fact that you could have made your point more clear, then are you going to go and retype pages 2 through 10 so you can do that? No, you're not going to do that. So you think about all of these inventions and innovations that changed. So that word processor made our paper quality skyrocket, because before that, you were just like, that's not worth it. I'm not going to do it. Then you could, but with the word processor, you can type it in, and you can print it out again, and the effort versus the value was significantly changed. Now you think about, we talked about asking the right questions. Well, so if we can ask questions of AI and go through a conversation, and within 10 minutes have something that took us 5 hours to do before, then we have to be able to make better decisions.
Here in mid-2025, I suspect I'm not the only one who feels this way, but much of what I hear and read about AI, the coming of AI as it evolves, sounds hyperbolic. It still feels like a cool new tool or app, when I think it's much bigger than that. I heard a guy yesterday say, with a comparison of, it's the next internet or whatever revolution we've had in the past with technologies being developed. He said it's the the biggest thing in the history of man since writing. Sounds hyperbolic.
Well,
to
so
me. That's big.
I'm sure that different industries have the impact at different levels. So as a data scientist, somebody that's been using computers my whole life, then it really has a big impact on mine. I think it will have an impact on consumers' lives as well, in the sense that it used to be that let's just say you had an idea for a pretty cool app to go on the is it App Store? I'm an Android guy, so that's on Google Play. So before, you'd be like, I have no idea how to make that app, and I've had experience with this, in the past where we've paid, tens of thousands of dollars to developers to try to create this app, and it is a long, drawn-out process, and it's never exactly what you want. Well, with AI, people that have all of these really cool ideas can say, you know what, I can get 80 to 90% there with just some help with AI. Now I can go to some investors, and I can show them this working prototype. And so aren't we going to have a lot more really cool apps? And that, I think that's just one aspect of what AI can do for us. Now, it may, for some of the bigger companies like a Salesforce or something like that, you might have a lot more competitors. So now this big moat that you had around your really cool software, if AI can help you implement things so fast. This smaller thing that I was doing for a nonprofit over the weekend was that I was talking to the person that used it, and she would say, well, could it do this? And I was like, all right, well, because I already had a really good flow going with AI, I typed that in and I said, let's make this change. And within 5 minutes, AI had already made that change. I deployed it. It worked. We had the feature that she wanted. Whereas in the past, that might have been a 2-week sprint with software developers.
Yeah.
So I think that's just an example of how even though there's a lot of hype, and you in your industry may not see, not your industry, but for the listeners, they may not see what AI can do for them. It doesn't mean that it's not fundamentally changing some of the other things that will have a ripple effect, and they may be on that second or third or fourth ripple. But even if you're not using it for your key processes in your business, if even a landscaper could have it go out, and you could have it send a much more professional email or text. You can say, I want an email that does this, this, and this, and maybe you can write that in their whatever language that they're in, and have that translated to English. They can drum up more business. You might have there are probably thousands of ways that people could use AI that they're not even thinking about right now.
So let me ask a question.
Go ahead.
We need to wrap up pretty soon. This is going to be a very deep question that I want to answer in 30 seconds or less.
All right.
So use your AI, Warren.
So knowing you were coming in, I was thinking about this. I was listening to an interview of a songwriter talking about how to write a great song. And he said, you can't write a great song just because you can articulate well an idea. You have to feel it. You have to have experienced it. You have to have lived it. So the question is, you made me think of this when you mentioned reasoning earlier in our conversation. Can AI have a soul?
That's a deep question.
That is very deep. I did not know that here on this episode of Bugle Notes. I did not know that.
I would not. I didn't know. AI. I'm a religious person, and I don't think that AI is going to.
You say no.
I would say no.
Will it be able to create great art?
So that's an interesting thing that that usually comes up. And I was rewatching the Will Smith iRobot,
Oh yeah.
and that had a great conversation in there between him and the robot.
Yeah.
And he's very anti-robot and anti-AI in this thing. And he's basically just yelling as he's interrogating this AI, and he's saying something like, you can't create a symphony, and the AI says,
Can you?
Can you?
Yeah, I remember that.
So it's a very interesting question that we could get into, in terms of will AI be able to create a symphony better than our best composers?
Right.
Beethoven, Bach, and
Right.
Mozart, and all of them? Probably not. Can it create one better than I can create? 100, I'll say 1,000%.
Easy.
Yes, it's easy for it to create better than me.
Right.
So I do think that we shouldn't hold AI to some standards that we don't hold people to. Sometimes there's pushback that somebody will type in something into the chat GPT, it'll give them an answer that was wrong, and they'll say, I can't trust AI.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we treated our colleagues or our friends that way, you would hire somebody new coming in here, and you would have them do, maybe they worked great for 4 days, and then on the 5th day they told you something that was wrong, and then you would say,
Done.
can't ever trust you again.
Right.
I'm just going to fire you. I'm
Yeah.
going to find somebody else that will never ever make a mistake.
You're wrong, yeah.
Well, we're asking artificial intelligence to be more human-like. Well,
Yeah.
humans do make mistakes.
Mm.
Some humans can create some pretty cool things. Some can't. So no soul, but I do think that it can create some really cool art.
Right.
It can probably write some really cool lyrics, and it can do some things and get you, just like everything else, get you 80 to 90% there.
Yeah, it can get you serviceable, right?
And then
Polish it up.
then you polish it up.
So, as we kind of conclude our discussion here, I want to hit two things. I do think that in the same way that the internet changed the way that we live our lives, and there's this massive utility function that comes from the internet and the access to information, our ability to be able to connect with people the way that we do now that are not sitting across the table from us. We could be doing this on a Zoom or Teams or something like that, and that was not something that was readily available to the public 20 years ago. That there's a lot of utility that can be derived from this technology, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the companies that have kind of led the charge in there, that they necessarily are great survivors on the other side.
It's true.
Because back in the late 90s, Cisco, JDS Uniphase, Netscape, however many of those companies that were synonymous with the arrival of the internet, America Online, right? That most of those companies don't exist today in the same form that they did. Some of them don't exist at all. And that I do think that that's something that investors need to take some awareness of, that there can be much utility that we derive as a society. Maybe companies that are employing the AI are the ones that are the benefactors of it, and not necessarily the ones that are creating it, so to speak.
Yeah, it gets back to NVIDIA too.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it goes back to that same,
The
story.
investment that these initial companies are having to make, I don't know, but it just doesn't seem like they could be making this money back in a very quick fashion, because they've had to do a lot of R&D, a lot of training. They've had to buy these chips. They've had to do that. So so yes, there could be. How many of these companies are going to survive? I don't know, but they're all trying to.
They're
survive,
all trying, right?
And they're all spending a lot of money. Could be, with a similar thing like, and maybe I'm getting the financials wrong on Uber, but when Uber first came out, it was really cheap, and it was a no-brainer to take an Uber versus a taxi. Well, it turns out I think they were using a lot of investor money to make sure.
Yeah, they're getting market share.
They're getting market share.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, we've got to show a profit. Now we've got to make it. And sometimes you look at it and say the Uber's $70 to the airport and a taxi's $40. Well, I'll take the taxi. And so sometimes when if I'm paying $20 a month and I'm a power user of some of these models, then it's probably costing them more than $20 a month. I can say that when I'm doing some of the AI generated or AI assisted coding and I'm using it and I'm paying for the tokens, I can run through $20 worth of tokens in a day or maybe 2 days. But they're just hoping that most people right now are going to pay the $20 a month.
Yeah, and
underutilize it and ask the questions.
Yep.
And get the answer, and then they're done. Whereas I will have it carry on a long conversation.
Sure. So one of the last things I want to talk about is some of the dangers of AI, and we know there's some great benefits from it. Could make us more efficient at things that we do, give us higher quality information, help us to make better decisions. But there are concerns that people would have, not necessarily that the computers are going to take over the world, right? It's not going to turn into an iRobot situation. But I was at a conference in New York last November, and there was somebody giving a speech there where they were talking about concerns around deep fakes, and that AI could watch this podcast today and it's listened to enough of my voice, your voice, that somebody could ask AI to make a phone call impersonating you, and it has the same intonations to your voice, and it's impossible virtually for somebody on the other side of the phone to be able to distinguish between that and the real McCoy.
That's true. Yeah, I think that that is definitely doable, and the danger is how fast you can do that with machine learning and or AI these days. So creating something that mimics your voice, that would be machine learning. Making it respond to me in real time, that's a large language model. That's what we call broader AI. So all of these things, we know these things are wrong, but the problem that AI creates in this sense is as you pointed out, the same thing that helps us get all this information more quickly. It's just that it puts these tools in everyone's hands, and they can do it so much faster.
Actors, right?
Even bad actors.
Bad actors.
Yeah.
It's video, and it's the president announcing he's dropping a bomb on, whoever.
Yeah. So I think there's got to be other ways that we can put checks and balances into all of these things. So,
but can you legislate that? I mean, I think that would be a challenge.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I would think that the only way that the concern in our industry right now is going to be that a bad actor uses AI to have a fake phone call come in from a client saying, "I need you to send me $1 million," and the person's on the phone.
Our verbal authorization.
Yeah, all of those things, and they're going to send the money out. The only way that we combat that is going to have to be the connection that you have with that client, where you've previously spoken to this person that they're going to be buying a home or whatever it is.
Yeah.
the only way to be able to combat those bad actors is going to be the personal connection that you have, and that there has been advanced planning that has gone on, that you've had advance notice, so you don't get caught off guard by things like that.
But I do think you're going to see legislation, because I just saw in the Atlanta news last night, I think it was, it may have been a state legislature, but there's some legislation about the poor girl who was, they created some, inappropriate pictures of her that spread around and, hurt her in various ways, psychologically and otherwise, that wasn't really her. And there's legislation that has not yet passed in place to put people who do that in jail. So I'm sure just some other version of that's going to come along.
But imagine, that you'd have to know who to hold accountable for that, right? I mean, if some of these situations, it's offshore and
so it would be. So there's probably legislation that prevents. So that would be fraud. That would be doing something on the internet / phone lines, and so there's a lot of legal things that are probably already. A lot of things that are probably already illegal in that situation, but I think
it's not going to stop the
the
wrong people from doing the wrong things.
So if we can't stop the fraudsters that way, then there's got to be there's going to be some other way that AI makes that connection with you. So it sounds like it's you telling them to do something, or them telling you to do something. But maybe we've got some other multi-factor authentication, all these other types of things, because there's going to be some people that fall prey to this, and then it'll happen enough to where some company comes up with a solution, and maybe there's just something we haven't even thought of yet. But I do get the risks on all this. Things at scale are as fast as AI can generate them. It is a serious worry for putting that in the hands of bad actors. But just like anything, the internet in the hands of a bad actor is bad. The telephone in the hands of a bad actor is bad.
Yep.
We've got to figure out ways of. Some smart people, I'm sure, will try to figure out these ways.
That's right. Well, Joe, anything else that you think that we need to talk about today? Warren, anything?
No, this was awesome.
I think we're nicely over time.
Yeah. Well, Warren, thank you so much for spending the time with us, coming down. We appreciate your expertise in all this and everything that you've shared with us today. We appreciate everybody tuning in for this latest episode of Bugle Notes. If there's anything that you want us to follow up with Warren on, in particular, questions that you have about AI, feel free to shoot us a note. You can reach us at info@reveillewealth.com. But thank you again so much for tuning in, and we will see you next time right here on Bugle Notes.